Attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma.
With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63-62. 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Fred Brown looking. Oh, way to Worthy. Worthy 5. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship.
Rebounded by Weber. Michigan out of timeout. Weber front court. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. They're out of timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul. Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebounded. There. It's over. Carolina has won the national championship. And how about them Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
That's it! Make room for 2017. The Tar Heels are the national daggum champions.
This is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Joshua Marlowe.
Hey guys, welcome to this edition of the Roy's Boys podcast, powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you as we always are tonight. Going to recap a frustrating 75-61 Carolina win over Elon tonight in the Smith Center. And this game was a lot uglier than I think we anticipated going in. Carolina was plagued by yet another slow start, as that's becoming a disturbing trend so far in the early portion of the basketball season. In fact, they trailed tonight at home 33-32 to Elon before opening the second half on a 17-2 run to take control of the game and eventually pull away for a 75-61 victory. This was not the best game for Carolina on offense, as Cole Anthony struggled with just a season-low 9 points on 4-14 shooting. But Armando Bacot responded after Roy Williams challenged him in the postgame, giving Carolina 22 points and 14 rebounds to pace the offense as they struggled once again in the half court. Anthony, this is, we talked about in the preview that this is a final tune-up for Carolina where you head to the Bahamas, and that really starts the brutal portion of your non-conference schedule. And needless to say, Carolina did not look good in their last action before they take the court in the Battle for Atlantis.
Yeah, that was it's not what we would expect from this team normally early in the season against some of the lesser opponents. But, at this point, they've pretty much played 3 straight games basically the exact same way. It's almost as if these are, just the same game on repeat, where they start slow. They, at halftime, game's pretty close, or in this case tonight, trailing, and come out in the second half, and, that's when you start to adjust things, and you're able to pull away a little bit, but ultimately at the end of the game, whichever opponent you're facing ends up keeping it close. So yeah, it's got to be frustrating at this point, especially not only for the fans. That's the thing. I feel like a lot of people are on social media saying how they're frustrated with the start for this team. It's also really frustrating for the coaching staff, because you got to think that they are looking at this and saying, we are so much better than what we're putting on the court right now for an entire 40 minutes. And we saw it again at times tonight, where this team looked like the type of team that we thought they could look like early in, before the season started. And I think, right now this team is just, they're working through some things. I'm not overly concerned just yet. I think there are some people that are maybe blowing it out of proportion just a little bit about how bad things are, but this is not the start that many people envisioned for this 2019-20 Tar Heel basketball team.
Yeah, you mentioned the coaching staff being frustrated, and you point to Roy Williams calling a timeout at the 17:51 mark, I think, in the first half, because his team came out not ready to play for the second straight game at home. They weren't ready to go as they found themselves in an early hole. And then you got the cameraman panned over to him at one point later in the early part of the first half, and he's just got his hands in his head. And so you can tell, even though we're 2 weeks in, he's frustrated with how his guys are playing. Mm-hmm. He's going to blame himself, say he's got to do a much better job. And then that's the kind of coach Roy is. But you're right, this team, for whatever reason, whether it's the injuries, and they're not as cohesive at this time, they don't look. I guess there's no sense of urgency when the game starts. And that's something that, Roy Williams harps on, is being ready to play, and they haven't been. I don't know if it's because the opponent's jersey says Elon and not Notre Dame, and these games don't mean anything in terms of ACC standings, but they've got to find a way to come out ready to play, because next week, if not, you'll find yourself down 20 pretty early, and this team isn't built to come back from those kind of deficits. And so it's something that they've got to keep working at, being ready to go when the ball gets tipped off into the air. I did think, though, that it was important for this team to find other ways to score outside of Cole Anthony. And tonight, their best offense was what Roy Williams wants it to be, which was put the ball inside. Mm-hmm. Elon doesn't have a guy on the floor that can match up with Garrison Brooks, let alone Armando Bacot, and those two combined for 36 points. And it really is the first time this year we've seen Carolina put the ball inside consistently enough and get results.
Yeah, I mean, we've been asking them to do that, going back to last year, we were asking them to do that. That's just part of what we want to see from this Carolina team. And like you said, that's part of what Roy Williams wants to see from his Carolina teams, because when they've been at their best in the past under Roy Williams, they've been able to score the ball inside a consistent rate. They've had one of those big guys inside that can get the job done. And Armando Bacot tonight, this was probably one of the best games that we'll see from him all year. 22 points, 14 rebounds, just a complete overall night. 4 of 7 from the free throw line, not great. But I thought, especially in the second half, he demanded the basketball a lot more inside like he needed to. You could see the confidence start to develop for him, and that also parlayed on the defensive end where he played really well. And then Garrison Brooks, we talked about in the preview, one of the guys that I said we didn't really talk a whole lot about being that other scoring option was Garrison Brooks. Tonight, 14 points, 6 of 12, and added 6 rebounds. The other thing, I mean, he didn't play all that great tonight. I'm going to be really honest with you. I thought there were times where he just made some mistakes that he shouldn't be making as a junior, and still found a way to put up 14 points and still have a solid overall night. So this was, I'm going to tell you, this will be one of those games where you're going to look back, you're going to look at the score and say, okay, that we should have definitely beaten Elon by more. I thought that, especially early in the game when we were struggling with them. This is not a great basketball team. We shouldn't be having these issues. But in the long run, this game might be really big for Carolina going forward, because we got to see what happens when Cole Anthony isn't on, when he's not playing his best. And it showed these guys that, look, we can't always lean on him to step up and carry us, because he is going to have off nights. And when he does, somebody else on this team has to step up. I thought you saw it from the big guys tonight. I thought Christian Keeling had some moments where he was able to score the basketball a little bit better than he has been throughout the season. And that was something that was really encouraging to me.
I think something that you touched on was this team learning how to win when Cole Anthony isn't playing at the level we are accustomed to playing. It kind of reminded me of last year. You think back after Carolina got blown out by Louisville in a game that kind of saved the season. Roy Williams harped on, we've got to find ways to win games ugly. And that team, as the ACC season grew, figured out how to do that. This team is learning how to do that now, which I think is going to pay dividends for them in the long run. because if they want to beat a team like Ohio State, if they want to go to Virginia, which they go to in 2 weeks, and beat the Cavaliers, chances are they're going to have to make the game a little bit ugly at this time of the season. One thing that's been very impressive with Carolina has been their defense in the half court, for the most part, has been very good for the early part of the year. I know the competition outside of Notre Dame isn't overwhelming, but, I mean, you're starting 2 freshmen. There's reasons why you could see the defense would lapse at times, and it hasn't. They've been very good in terms of holding teams to low points. 61 against 9, I think it's the 4th straight game they've held the opponent to 65 or less, which is the first time ever under Roy Williams to start a season. And I think that's something that we haven't looked at. We've been so focused on the struggles on the offensive end, but this team is getting the job done defensively.
That was one of the keys that we talked about when we previewed the Notre Dame game, but basically the season preview that we did. We talked about if this team is going to be as successful as many people believe they can be, they are going to have to be better on the defensive end, especially early in the year. I'm not going to say that we saw these types of struggles on the offensive end, but we knew there would be games where this team really wouldn't be able to score the basketball at will like they did last year because they lost so many of the shooters that made them successful a year ago. You're right. I mean, they're doing everything that they need to do on the defensive end. I thought, Elon came out, scored 20 points in the first 7 minutes of the game. Then Carolina sort of started to settle in, ratchet up that half-court defense that you talked about. And once they really sort of gained a little bit of life on the defensive end, that not only did that turn into great stops on the defensive end, that worked out on the offensive end as well, turning into some nice possessions. And one of the things that you wanted to see so much of, which was the fast break offense. That was something that we saw a little bit at the end of the half that I wanted to see more of in the second half. We did at times see them start to pick up the pace a little bit, and we hadn't seen it a whole lot early in the season, but that was where Carolina really looked the best offensively. So, yeah, I think that this defense is definitely better than a lot of people want to give them credit for. It's just the thing is, the reason why the offense is the focus right now is because we're not seeing those huge margins that we're kind of expecting against UNCW and Gardner-Webb and Elon. So that's where I think people are kind of getting a little over-concerned about the offense and not really looking at how good this team is defensively. We saw it a little bit against Notre Dame, too. I mean, held them to only 65 points. So I'm going to be interested to see what they do when they go out to the battle for Atlantis. Is this a team that, really just hasn't played a great offensive team so far? Or is this a team that really is that good defensively? I think playing 3 games in 3 days against some legit opponents. I mean, Alabama is a bubble team every year, it seems, and this year should be no different. Then you got Iowa State or Michigan, I believe, is the other team. Out of those two, neither one of those are going to be easy. And then, of course, if you get to the final, that you don't know who you're going to run into there. It's going to be a test for Carolina, and I think that's one of the things that we need to kind of mark down, come back to, and reevaluate once the battle for Atlantis is complete.
Yeah, you look at some numbers tonight that really keyed this Carolina victory. You got 15 points in the fast break, so they're building off what they did last Friday against Gardner-Webb. 17 second chance points. They had 46 points in the paint, which is by far the most of the year. They only got 9 points off of turnovers, but then again, they only forced 10. I think that's been the thing that's been kind of odd is as good as Carolina's been in the half court, they're not forcing turnovers at a rate that you'd like to or what you'd expect them to against this kind of competition, but they're still finding ways to get the job done defensively. And the battle for Atlantis is going to be a great measuring stick for this team as much as any game that they'll play on in the whole non-conference slate, because you get 3 games in 3 days. So you're going to see a lot of who you are in a short amount of time. And it can go one or two ways where they can perform really well and build off of that. Or if they struggle, then you're going to, then the doubters are going to peak up and there's going to be some questions within that locker room.